What we can't control is when we get out into construction, all of the things that are going on as you would like to control them. We understand the human element and we're all about protecting the human element, but we also have to have the ability to speak to numbers. So I would encourage you to figure out a way to be passionate about what you do and then to bring that passion right into that C-suite office so that they know without a doubt that you're passionate about what you do.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zalle. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Canary Report. I'm Michael Zalle, and I am pleased to welcome Dennis Pivin, who has joined me after meeting us recently to talk to us about the things that they're doing at NASSCO and a little bit about his history. So thank you for joining me. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So before we kick off, I want to, thank everybody. Apparently, we are the top 100 business podcast launches in the country. And so that was super exciting for me to find out this morning. And so we've just relaunched the podcast. And so I'm very, very excited to hear that we went off with a bang and we're getting a lot of traction. So probably because of my wonderful guests like Dennis. And so I'm super excited that you're with us today. And let's kick off by giving a little bit of understanding of who you are. Like, give us your background and maybe a little bit about you personally and your journey and all that good stuff.
Oh, well, congratulations, by the way, on the podcast. That's really very awesome, isn't it? How cool is that, man? Right? You got a podcast that's resonating and doing well out there. So again, thanks for the invite. It's always great to have an invite from somebody like yourself and this Yellowbird Canary Report. I'm really very flattered. So thanks for having me. A little bit about Dennis. Dennis has been in health and safety for a long time. And that's great because you learn so much, right, over your time there. But the interesting is how I got into this, right? Back when I was in college, I was studying to be a veterinarian doctor and just decided at some point in time I didn't want to be a veterinarian doctor anymore. And what was I going to do? So I finished up a dual major in chemistry and biology, which took me into industrial chemical manufacturing, and spent a few years running a quality control lab, understanding resin manufacturing. And then that company, it was a small company, they had an opportunity to create a health and safety department. And they realized I had the background in biology as well as chemistry. So they asked me if I'd be interested. And that's how I got into health and safety. Interesting twist. Most people go to school nowadays to become health and safety professionals. But for me, it was a different path. Asking about a little bit of my background, right, with my family, I'm blessed to be married over 40 years. My lovely wife, Marcy, and we have two beautiful children, young adults now, not children anymore. My daughter, Elizabeth, my son, Ed, and they've both blessed us with grandchildren. So there you go. So I'm a grandfather as well. So very awesome.
Well, congratulations. First of all, I am excited for you to be able to enjoy being a grandfather. I am not in a hurry to become one because my son is 20 years old, just about 21, and my daughter is 16. So we are still in the thick of it. But I've been married 25 years, and it's always fun to meet somebody and hear from somebody who has taken the journey with a partner, a long journey that has its ebbs and flows. And at the end of the day, children and grandchildren and your legacy, it's super exciting to hear that. Your background is actually very interesting to me because when I think about you as a human being and knowing what I know about you, which is relatively limited, based on based upon, the background I could research and so forth. The petrochemical and specifically the chemical background is the type of thing that I exemplify often when we talk about when people say, why do you believe that this individual is qualified, quote unquote, to do a service on Yellowbird or anywhere else? How do you identify somebody's superpowers, or how do you identify somebody's background and their match as a Yellowbird pro? And I always say people's journeys are what make them who they are as a professional. Yes, there's regulations. Yes, there's compliance. We all take the same tests, but within reason, of course, there's specialty tests. But at the end of the day, being a CSB or an ASB or going into industrial hygiene, it really matters for whom and for where you're doing so, and your background is meaningful in that. And so it's such an interesting journey you took. Now, I think a lot of people in this industry have a similar story where they were, young and open to it, and somebody in leadership says, "We need a better safety program. Can you do it?" And then all of a sudden you go down this path. So it's like you were voluntold that it's time for you to become a safety professional, and
so true.
Yeah, and some people gravitate towards it and stick with it, and some people say, "All right, that was a good experience for a brief period of time, and now I'm going back to what I actually have a passion for," and that's fine too. So, tell me about what you're doing now. About your recent journey in your career, like the last decade or so, and how you ended up at NASSCO.
Yeah, it's. I think you'll find the story interesting. So I was in petrochemical resin manufacturing, as I mentioned. Right, we'll pick it up from there, and was looking for something a little different to do. So I left that company, went into remediation, hazardous waste remediation industry. I spent a few years there and realized, as you were saying earlier, well, maybe this isn't my calling, right? It just, I enjoyed the work, but it wasn't a passion for me. So I gravitated back to chemical processing, but this time it wasn't in resin manufacturing. It was in surfactant type chemical processing. But there I had safety responsibilities, environmental responsibilities. And so it was more of an encompassing role. Again, I enjoyed it, but I was like, this just isn't, I feel like I'm called to do something else. And what is that? And my father was always in construction. He was a construction engineer. I liked construction. And I did take a look at it as a project manager at one point. And I thought, I don't want to be a project manager. So let's try safety. So I left the chemical processing industry, went into underground infrastructure. And that's where my safety role kicked off on the construction side. Started off as a safety manager and then worked my way up where I became a vice president of safety, health, and environmental. Now this is a company that, was 1 billion in size. So we're not talking small. I had 10 years of development there, but learned a lot, right? Coming from the safety manager role into the C-suite, where I worked with the CEOs and the chief operating officers and the board of directors on a routine basis, right? As the VP of an operation that large, you get involved at all aspects of the business. As private equity has come onto the scene and changed things, private equity came in and there were changes, and I felt like it was again a time for me to make an adjustment in my career. So I transitioned to NASSCO. NASSCO is a 501c6 trade association, and their focus is multi-layered, but when you look at what they do, they set standards for the industry, underground infrastructure industry. They provide resources. Well, providing resources is primarily in the training of the men and women who work in this industry. So the people who are measuring pipe, determining what type of pipe needs to be repaired, whether it's water or sewer. NASSCO does a great job of providing resources. They've got a bevy of programs, PACP, ITCP, and the list goes on to train these folks in the industry. Well, what I'm doing for safety and health now is helping enhance that training resource for NASSCO. But in addition to that, they do advocacy work, and I absolutely love it. We just were up in Washington, D.C. for a fly-in for NASSCO, where we were meeting with senators and congressmen and women and talking to them about the underground infrastructure of our country and why we need the resources that we do to keep it all intact and working and functioning, right? We all know that the infrastructure here in the United States is very old. And, in the 1960s, it was always a dig and replace type of mentality for infrastructure. And then what started to change in the 70s was this technology called cure-in-place pipe, where we could actually line a pipe without digging it up. And now we're able to fix infrastructure with a variety of techniques, including CIPP, but other types of technologies on the water side and the wastewater side. So all those transmission lines, right?
Is CIPP the in-place technology that you're referring to? Okay.
Yes,
good.
right.
I try to clarify for those who don't know that are listening.
Yeah.
So,
Michael, I live in the world of acronyms, so thank you. Sometimes I rattle these things off, and
we do. We all do.
Think everybody else knows them, right?
Yes.
So the industry shifted very heavily in the 70s to where we are today with all the new technologies to not have to dig up. Can you imagine if you live in any major city in this country, and every time a water pipe broke, it had to be dug up and your street closed, how that would affect businesses, how that affects the homeowners, how it affects the residents, right? So these technologies are so vital to improving our infrastructure without having to disrupt all the commerce and the lives of everybody. So it's really fun place to be and work for that reason. You see the impact of what NASSCO and NASSCO member companies.
I was going to ask you the acronym NASSCO, and then also, and who are your members?
Yeah, National Association of Sewer Service Companies, but they're made up of about 30% are contractors. So the people actually doing the work. I think the fallacy was that NASSCO was all just contractors, but that couldn't be further from the truth when you look at the makeup we have today. So you got about 30% contractors, you got about 25% public agencies, those are the municipalities that, right, are responsible for this infrastructure and these transmission lines getting things moving. And then you've got another 25% in NASSCO that are consulting engineers that support those municipalities when they're trying to do their designs. And then the other 20% is associate suppliers, things of that nature. So NASSCO has a very, I think, well-rounded group of participants, right? It's not dominated by one specific group, which makes it unique, I think.
And it's nationwide. Where are you based physically?
I physically am based in the St. Louis area, and NASSCO's offices are in Frederick, Maryland. So I get to go up and visit every once in a while. They let me in.
Yeah, it's I find that's common in our industry, the safety industry, and particularly when you have influence. Headquarters tend to be in Maryland, Virginia, somewhere in the Beltway, but most of the doers and the folks are spread out throughout the country, which is good. I mean, it's good that we can live in that environment these days. There's a lot of things that were side benefits of the post-COVID era. And that was one of them.
Couldn't agree more. And, for what I do in my job, just to add on to that, right, being centrally located in the country, it makes it easier for me to support our members because I'm not flying coast to coast. So I can get to the East Coast, I can get to the West Coast, I can get to the Gulf, and I can get to the Northeast if I need to. And we do support our members in Canada. We're not just the United States. We have Canadian companies as well. So I do get up into Canada quite often. So it makes St. Louis is a good location for that travel.
Now, how many members are part of the NASSCO ecosystem? How many folks do you guys actually have? Roughly, obviously, I never prepped you on this question, so you may not actually know the answer.
Yes, since you didn't prep me on it, I haven't the slightest idea.
And that is perfectly understandable, and I completely respect your answer there. How do you deal with this is one of the things that we've been struggling with as a company. You have the state-run OSHA programs. You've got federal OSHA programs. You have industry-specific regulations that are involved in, I imagine, underground. You and we'll touch on this on confined space training and so forth, how all confined space training is not the same. And now when you go into Canada, it's all different. So how do you run a safety, ecosystem to support your members in Canada? And is it difficult to support folks? Because it's completely, again, they all fundamentally have the same, I imagine. I shouldn't speak for that because I don't know for certain, but I imagine fundamentally the risks are similar. But the laws, I imagine, and regulations and needs are different. How challenging has that been?
Oh, that is a challenge. I had global responsibilities where I came from. And so having to deal with responsibilities in Europe or Asia, Australia, Canada, these were all challenges inside of our business there. And it's no different here at NASSCO, although NASSCO isn't overseas in Europe and other areas of the world, but they are in Canada, as I mentioned. So, when you look at the Canadian rules, you're right. The risks are the same, of course, but how their government takes a look at those risks and then it wants companies to respond to that risk is a bit different than our country. You look at, we call it trenching and excavation. They call it ground disturbance. So just one example, right? And ground disturbance does look a little similar to our rules, but, depths are different, requirements are different, shoring requirements are stipulated differently, just to give you one example. So yeah, you have to be open-minded. You have to really, partner and understand, take the time to read and understand what their country's rules, regulations are, and how they want them implemented. So it can be a challenge, but not, I have great friends up there. I love to go visit Canada. I think they'd tell you, I hope they would tell you that I've been a good friend of them as well, to them as well. And they invite me up. I'm speaking in British Columbia, actually, at a No Dig North conference coming up in October. So I do get invited up there quite often to do presentations and speaking engagements for safety and health.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been really focusing recently on what it would take for us to open up Canada, because one of the value propositions of Yellowbird is that you having a dispersed workforce and a long distance between the skill set holders and somebody who has the exact background to serve in this training capacity or in this survey capacity, or even being on staff for a period of time, you can be many, many, many hundreds of miles away. And so having our model where you have people that are prepared to work, but only when called upon, can make a lot of sense. But it's a big undertaking to open another market in another country. We're in all 50 states, and that's complex. When you're dealing with just the local regulatory needs, say the NFPA or fire or anything, confined space, there's even state differences within the U.S., let alone going into provinces and multiple language being French and English, of course, French, Canadian, and so forth. So I always find it to be fascinating. So we were talking when we kicked off our initial conversation about what you're doing with your mobile training unit, and it's super exciting to me. I'm a builder. I love making things. I love creating things. I actually, in a past life, made a mobile cell phone tower for emergency response. We called it a PCOM, a portable communications system, which had satellite and mobile cellular and all this good stuff. And I loved it. And we created it from the ground up. Tell me about what you're building as part of your endeavors at NASSCO. That's part of this confined space, and the differences in confined space for what you're dealing with versus, what perhaps a tank confined space or a construction zone with limited area compared to what you're used to. That's I'm gonna combine two questions if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. I'm going to take the latter first. Having been in industry and helped with confined space training and confined space rescue, all of that, I am high angle rescue certified. So I went and, invested time in myself to understand the rescue side of what's involved when you get in confined space. But the industrial side is just very different. Why? Well, because most of the time on the industrial side, things are much more controlled when you really look at it, right? If we're in a plant and we're going to take a tank out of service, we can blind it, we can blank it, we can lock out, tag out, we can schedule production, we can control the environment that's going on inside of that industrial facility. And that's awesome. What we can't control is when we get out into construction, all of the things that are going on as, you would like to control them. So let's take, for example, specifically underground infrastructure. If you're climbing in and out of manholes are confined spaces, right? It's a sewer, let's be honest, right? So how do I know if I'm going down into a sewer, what somebody's dumped in that sewer upstream? while I'm down there. I have no idea. Right. So I'm exposed potentially to a higher level of risk versus the industrial market, right? Where they control all those things. We can't always blank and blind sewer systems because we'll back up people's houses. We'll back up sewage into their business. So those type of things have to be planned and scheduled. And so the average worker is going to go down, a municipality worker, somebody who's just out there checking the sewers to make sure they're functioning. Maybe that individual has to go down in a sewer. Now, we're entering confined space. We really don't have control over all of what's going on in that space. So we want to be cautious about how they get in to protect their lives so that there are warnings, right? They can use air monitoring equipment to make sure that their levels of oxygen are good. We talk about the gases in the sewers, just naturally occurring. Hydrogen sulfide, H2S, right? It's the byproduct of all things degradation in organic matter. So whether it's human waste or it's plant waste or it's whatever, it's going to produce H2S. H2S has a vapor density heavier than air, so it always settles in those low places. Sewers are no exception. And so we have to deal with H2S, right? So the monitors help us, the ventilation systems we put in place help us, the permits, and then having a system in case something goes wrong after we put all those things in place, that we could bring a worker out of that confined space immediately if they need help. So that's where the harnesses and the retrieval systems, tripods, those types of things all come into play so that we can retrieve those workers.
Now, are those devices, say the sensor devices and the harness systems and so forth, are they mandated by every municipality and every operation to have these things? Or is it something that you're training for best practices, but a lot of people don't have them? I actually don't know the answer, by the way. So it might be a loaded question. It's not intended to be.
No, but it's a complicated answer. So I'm going to answer it as best I can for our audience here. So when you look at best practices, right? If you're a private sector, the new OSHA 1926 subpart AA has been enhanced. That's the confined space standard for construction. And it's new. It's been enhanced. It's very good. It's very robust. And it outlines the specifics. It mirrors in a lot of ways what we had in the original industrial confined space standard, but now we have one that's very good in construction. So if you're private sector, right, you're going to follow the OSHA 1926 subpart AA. When it comes to municipalities, unfortunately, that gets gray. You wouldn't think so, but it has, and that's where we're spending a lot of time at NASSCO, educating our municipalities, giving them support, giving them the help to make sure that they understand the risks and that those risks are real, and they need to pay close attention to how they're accessing underground infrastructure on a regular basis.
That makes a lot of sense. So from your mission with this mobile unit that you're designing and so forth, and that you've designed and are rolling around and training and so forth, are you doing a train the trainer type of thing? Like, we have about 7,000 people on the Yellowbird platform. Would we train those folks on how to train others on these programs? Is that the kind of thing that makes sense? Or is there something specific that that you need to be licensed in a certain way or have some kind of a government specific certification in order to train people on how to do these types of things? Right.
Well, let's go back to the simulator and I'll answer your question. I'm calling it the Confined Space Simulator. We just had a Health and Safety Committee meeting at NASSCO yesterday, and we all decided that's what we're going to call it. So we weren't sure. Last time I talked to you, we were just not quite sure. So
I'll call it by a proper name now. So yes, the simulator. So tell me about the simulator.
So let me tell your audience a little bit about it, right? This was a device that I had developed at previous employer, but I wanted to bring it as an opportunity forward into NASSCO as well. And we've made a lot of enhancements since the original design concept that I had before. So what is it? It's a 20-foot cargo container. I've seen other companies or other facilities have something similar, but we've done a couple of nuances here that I think have brought it to a higher level. We put it on the 20-foot. We put the 20-foot cargo container on a trailer, and on the trailer we have modified steps. So you're not climbing up the side of the cargo container or having to worry about roll-around steps when you get it to said location. They're actually on the trailer, the steps. So they're attached. That's kind of nice now. Makes it the access on top very nice. On the top, we have pop-up railings. So we can transport, right? We can fold them down. We get to location. They have popper pins. We pop them into place. And now we have the correct protection up there on top of that 20-foot cargo container while we're training. Up there, we have a manhole. We put in a manhole lid, just like you would see in the street. So they're familiar with how to pop that lid. A lot of injuries occur when you're taking out manhole lids, between smashed fingers, hurt backs, hurt shoulders, you name it. So we teach people proper techniques.
Toes.
Yeah, exactly, right? How to get those manhole lids open safely. So you get a chance to practice that with a manhole hook and other techniques that we teach up there. And then we're going right back into confined space. We set up tripod up there. We have a blower. We have the permit. We have the harnesses. Everybody suits up. We lower them into the manhole, and then we've connected that to a horizontal pipe that runs length of the trailer. And that's a 36-inch diameter pipe down there. So we have a couple of ways that we decided to make this a little more interesting. We put cameras in there. So now when we're training people and we have, multiple people in the class, they can watch their peer get lowered into this pipe and then crawl the pipe. We have set television screens up outside that we attach to the container. So the audience can sit out there and watch how this works and what they're doing. We have lights, of course, and then we can turn off the lights so we can make it a completely dark environment to give the effect, right, that something's gone wrong and you're in a rescue mode. When I do the training, I like to actually do a retrieval. So the entrant knows that I'm asking them to crawl down the pipe and then basically just relax and get retrieved. It gives them the opportunity to feel what that's like should they need to be retrieved. It gives the people, the attendant up top, the real feel of what it's like to bring an entrant out of a pipe who is not helping them. They're not crawling. They're not walking. You got to bring them out. It's done safely. The entrants have said it. It's really a really neat experience to feel what this is like, so you know how your equipment's going to work. I think in a lot of cases, what I've learned in my history with people who work in underground infrastructure is they didn't have confidence in their equipment. They might have been worried about a number of issues that this wasn't going to work or what it was going to do to them. And when they're able to crawl into this device and actually experience how it feels and what happens to them, they're like, wow, this equipment works. I can have confidence now, in knowing that I can be retrieved safely and get out of this thing should something happen down there that's out of my control. So the simulator provides us, we've upgraded, as I said, the cameras, the lighting, things like that we didn't have in the earlier designs. And the feedback that we're getting, we had it at the Underground Infrastructure Conference and have since been working with several other conferences who have asked us to bring it there. We really want this to have our members and our people at the conference to have an opportunity to take the class. Now, I'm going to come back around to your other question. So can we use this to do a train-the-trainer? Absolutely. I think it has a multifaceted aspect to it. I think you want to train the folks who are the workers, the guys that are getting in the pipe, the people who have to be attendants. You really want them to have the hands-on experience and training. But you also want to be training your superintendents or your safety professionals or whoever it is in your organization that has to go out and train those same people in their company, right? So we can absolutely use it as a train-the-trainer product as well.
Interesting. So from that perspective, obviously with and again, a number I'm not going to ask you to retrieve off of your memory, but there's got to be millions of miles of this, piping and underground infrastructure that is affected by all of these things. How often do the people who are doing this kind of work get trained on the type of thing that you're talking about? Is there a requirement? Is there a standard that if you're doing work, underground manhole type of work, that you have to be trained for both, incident response as well as just general safety practices? Is there, I know with forklift, there's an annual requirement. There's different things. Do you guys have that in your industry?
Well, I always look at the regulatory industry, our friends at OSHA, right? They set the minimum standard. And with that said, then let's look at what makes sense. If you're asking people to get into risky environments underground on a daily basis, right? It makes sense to me to train them on an annual basis to make sure that they have all the skills they need. It's fine when nothing goes wrong, but can they perform when something does go wrong? And when they're under stress, right? And we know from military training, police force training, fire department training, the only way to ensure your workers can perform under stress is to do the training, right? So that's where I think the best recommendation comes from, is just train them. Train them on an annual basis. Don't look at what the minimum is. Just do what you know is right.
My daughter, who just turned 16, and she doesn't quite have her license yet. It's not like when we were young. Like I was in line the morning I turned 16, ready to go to the DMV to get my license. And these kids, I guess they've got other options there, or just have confidence will take them where they need to go, because she's not quite ready yet. But she did the defensive driving test, and it goes back to what you were saying, is she hated it because they put you in a simulator, similar concept to your simulator, and dogs would run out and people and balls would flow in front of her. And she's like, it was 2 hours of basically virtually hurting and killing people. It's like, she came out of there, her nerves were shot. And I said, that's good. It's good that you did that. She goes, yeah, but it was just so stressful. I said, it's better to do in a simulator. It's better to do in a training environment than actually be driving down the road and never having seen that ball roll out in front of the vehicle and likely a kid's behind it, never having at least had that experience. She goes, it was so stressful. And I said, good. You know what? I'd rather you be stressed in this environment than otherwise. So before your simulator existed, and again, this is a beautiful concept, but it's going to be difficult, not impossible, difficult to scale, because it sounds very complex and expensive. I mean, within reason, of course, and the value's there. But how did people do this training? And I would argue the point, by the way, that annual is probably not sufficient. I would say you should do it quarterly. And the reason is because of turnover of staff. If you are knowing you're going to have staff all the time that are going to be there year in and year out and nothing's going to change, but you have somebody leave and they happen to replace that person or come in a month after the 1-year training, they're going 11 months before they're going to get trained. And so that's probably not the best strategy in the world. But that being said, how do people do it today without the simulator?
A lot of them are doing it in the classroom, or some of them are doing computer-based training. We could talk about that for a whole nother podcast. I think CBT has its place, but does it have its place when you're really doing something at high risk as confined space entry? I think we could have that debate. And what I've seen from doing the training with the simulator and other training modules is that the CBT may be a good entry level for that new worker that you mentioned that comes on the site, that knows nothing about confined space. Sure, some CBT training for them to get started, to give them awareness, great. But you really have to have that hands-on component. So how was it done? Well, it either wasn't done, or maybe they would go out to a sewer and do the training. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but you better make sure that, right, you're training in a live environment now. So those hazards that we just mentioned earlier are real and they're there. And that might not be the best place to do your training, but it is kind of what I've seen in the past.
Yeah, and it does make sense. I mean, at the end of the day, not everybody has the resources to be able to have the simulator, and you have to be able to train people. There's nothing like a real environment. And my background being emergency response, my background being the importance of being truly prepared. And true preparation means that you've felt it, you've smelled it, you've experienced it. The second best is at least have something rather than nothing. But like I'm not against any type of training of any sort, but I do think there is a hierarchy of impact, and that and yours, I would imagine, is the top of the tier, which is super exciting. And I cannot wait to see it, by the way. I'm going to find where you are at some point, and I'm in Phoenix, so just keep me in mind if you ever are in the Southwest, and I travel a ton. I'd love to come see it. So over the next year or so, as you're doing your different initiatives, and then we'll wrap up because I appreciate the time you spent with me, is there anything that you are specifically excited about that's coming up that NASSCO's initiatives are, going to help advance the industry and really, I think it's such a wonderful organization just because you're representing the people who often don't have the resources to represent themselves. And so for me, that is a really special thing. Is there anything that you're doing over the next year that you want to, talk about that you think is any initiatives that you think are worth hearing?
Well, we're looking at NASSCO of adding this confined space. While we have the simulator, it's relatively new. We just really used it for the first time a couple of months ago. So we're just kind of getting our arms around it to see how we want to utilize it, what's going to flow. We're going to create an online class for the first part, right? So this will dovetail together. Unlike other types of online training where maybe it's more industrial related, our product's going to be related to underground infrastructure workers. So they'll get an hour or so in a program ability to go online at NASSCO.org and take the course there, which I'll be teaching. It'll be my voice, it'll be my slides, and it'll be relatable to them, right? And then they can come out and get the simulator wherever we have it, whether we're at whatever conference we're at or wherever it's at for other training, they'll have access to it. So they could come in and take the second half of the class for the hands-on component. So very excited about that. That'll be, we're building a safety protocol, just like we have those other resource training components for the underground infrastructure. We're going to build safety components for that as well. Confined space will be the first one. We already have a confined space video just for new workers or anybody who really wants to understand confined space in sewers and underground infrastructure. It's out there at NASSCO.org. It's a 15-minute video.
We'll post that on this episode. We'll post both your URL, your website for NASSCO itself, as well as these videos. Happy to do that and support these.
Yeah. So we're going to keep adding more safety products that are relatable to our industry on that NASSCO site and develop it. So that's a long-term goal for what we're doing at NASSCO.
That's fantastic. So if I can do a somewhat egregious plug, but I just want to say that if somebody from the NASSCO ecosystem with the training capabilities is available, please register on the goyellowbird.com site as a potential trainer, because I would love to be offering some of these training services. I think it's a value to the community. I think it's a value to the market. I think we would save lives. And so if anybody who's listening to this is confined space trained generally or specifically the NASSCO program, please do go on to Go Yellowbird. I'd love for you guys to make yourself available, and we won't go into all the other details, but again, there's no cost to that. I would love for these folks to be available should that happen, because I love what you're doing. I think it's truly life-saving. And if we can do more of it and help spread that word, I think it'd be fantastic. So as we wrap up, I do know that you have your own podcast. I don't want to monopolize, and you've got a way better podcast voice than I do, so I'm a little jealous of it. So tell us about your podcast, what you do, who you interview, what the format is, and then maybe give a couple of tidbits about upcoming episodes or focus areas, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate the comments in my voice. I'm glad to hear that you like it, and it seems to fit well with podcasting. That's awesome. We started off with experimental podcasting. We did several episodes, and they were more around interviewing me on specific safety topics, right? So we were doing fire extinguishers, for example, and we would do confined space, and we did air monitoring, how to use a 4-gas air monitor, and that was great. We liked it. So then we thought, well, let's see what we can do. We reached out to our members and what did they want, right? Because they were giving us positive feedback on the original podcast. And we changed the format. So the format is what you have here. So now I've moved over to the host chair, and I'm bringing folks in to have podcasts with. We did 12 of these at the NASSCO annual conference. So we set up a studio right there at the hotel. We had a company come in that handled all the intricate details, as you and I've talked about before we started this podcast, on what it takes to make these things really a good product. They came in, set everything up, and then I brought folks in to do the interviews. And we try not to just make this specific on a safety item, but it's relatable to safety. So what does that mean? So I interviewed a chief executive who is a member company of NASSCO. They develop the equipment that a lot of the industry uses, right? So whether they're TV vans or jetter trucks, right, vac trucks, these kind of things, they build those trucks. So I wanted to get them on to talk about, well, what kind of safety do they build into these pieces of equipment, for example, to protect the workers that use them? And then how do they make that equipment, and how do they do it safely? So you get that, as well as you get folks coming in who are talking about confined space and what do they do? How do they make their companies' training programs and train their workers on how to stay safe in confined space, to bringing in executives to tell me about what their safety culture is. How do they get their safety culture to where they're happy with it, and what are their results with it, right? To just, so my podcasts are a wide variety of underground infrastructure related businesses, NASSCO member companies, and their contributions internally as well as externally in trying to drive our safety in the business overall. We should have those up on the website here in the next couple of weeks. We're getting close, right? You know how it is. You have to go through all the production criteria, but they're definitely produced, and then we're just waiting to get them to the final phase to get them on the website.
Fantastic. Well, I will do a link again in this episode to your website and to where your podcast will be and so forth. And I want to ask you one last question, because
just one.
Just one, I promise.
Just one.
Yeah, like my kids. But that being said, the one last question is around, how do we as a community focus on the positive reinforcement of safety programs and training? And the reason I ask that is I find that the analytical sort of EHS leader tends to be a numbers person, and I'm hearing more and more through my customers the importance of the human, and they're doing 97% of the things great, and we're not highlighting that. And the 3% of areas of opportunity to improve, yes, we all have them. But have you seen anybody or any tactic that you think is really reinforcing the positive of what we do for a living? Is there anything that you'd like to share that you've seen has been exciting and interesting?
Well, the human factor, right, should always be number one. But let's take a look at, having been in the C-suite a number of years myself, right? The board of directors will, we hope, be on board with the human element of what they do. I think sometimes, they need to hear from safety professionals like ourselves to go in and talk to them about that human element and help them reconnect, right, to the fact that there are humans involved in the production of what they do and what makes them a successful company. I think once you reach out to the board, then it becomes the CEO, chief operating officer, the chief financial officer, and their buy-in and their understanding the human element in business, how vitally important it is that they do that. And when I was a previous employer, they understood that. And they invited me into board meetings to talk about all aspects of safety, not just when things went bad, but when things were going well. And did I have to talk about ROI, return on investment? Absolutely. Numbers, I think it's one hard transition for safety professionals to understand. We understand the human element, and we're all about protecting the human element, but we also have to have the ability to speak to numbers. And if you can cross over in both of those genres, you're going to be successful in safety. You have to know the numbers, and you have to have the human element component, and you have to be passionate about it. If you're a vice president of safety in your organization and you don't bring passion to the meeting, to the discussion, yeah, I'm sorry, you're not going to be very successful. I would encourage you to figure out a way to be passionate about what you do, and then to bring that passion right into that C-suite office so that they know without a doubt that you're passionate about what you do. And that passion will carry over. I've seen it have a positive effect, to your point. What is it we can do to be positive, right? Bring the passion, bring the energy, bring the excitement to safety and what the benefits are. Not just the dollars and cents benefits, but what we see and experience, right? Because let's be honest, one of the unique roles I think safety has is that we have the unique opportunity to have personal conversations with employees in the field, and then turn around and have that personal conversation with the CEO. How many roles can you really think of, whether you're a construction company or an industrial manufacturer, that have opportunities to do that? Not many, right? And we have it as safety. People trust us. In the workforce, they trust us. We have to bring that trust and that passion and energy into the C-suite, so that they really can get the understanding at the C-suite level about what their workers are experiencing and the positivity of these safety programs, and helping them get the support they need to do their jobs day in and day out and go home to their loved ones. I think everybody would say, yeah, we want everybody to go home. Oh, well, okay, great. But what does that really mean, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting you should say that, because it's easy to say, but at the end of the day, the actions are what, are you putting things in place? You get to be an evangelist for the worker. The only other position I know that's like that are people who are in account management or sales, who get to be an evangelist for their customer inside the organization. And they hear the needs of the customer, and they go within the organization to advocate for on behalf of their customer, to give them the best experience or best outcome that they're looking for. We do the same thing in this industry, except too many people think of it as a check the box scenario, where really when workers feel that they're cared for, they work harder, they care more about what they're doing, they pay attention. When they're listened to and they actually feel that you do actually care about getting them home safely, then they're going to go above and beyond for the company as well. And I think that's a piece that's missed more often than not. And it's one of the things that I'm really passionate about. We're having trouble right now as a company identifying the secret sauce of that skill in our professionals. You've got 7,000 plus people. I've got 50 some odd people a month that are signing up to become professionals. We background check all this stuff. You can do cert checks. You can check their resume. You can go through and ask them questions. But how do you measure evangelistic capabilities and passion? It's a hard thing to do. We're going to solve for it, and we are solving for it, but it's not an easy solve. It's a lot easier to say, how many years in industry do you have? It's a finite answer, right?
But where's your passion? Where's your energy? Right? At the end of the day, I guess I came into this naturally. I really enjoy going out to the field and meeting the workforce, sitting down with the employees, talking to them, getting to know them, just like you did with me on the podcast, their families. What do they do? And way too often, when I was talking to our C-suite, and I had some success with this, I encouraged them to come with me. They didn't want to go by themselves, but they would come out with me. And I'm like, great, come on out with me, right? And talk to the very workforce that wants to support you in a high level. Right. And they started to do it, and they saw the positives of that. And then they would start to go out on their own, because they saw how the employees reacted and how positive it was. Right. But I would like to take some credit for that I got that C-suite to open up a little bit and to actually go out in the field. We even developed a program. I got them to go so far as to set up a week, all of the 5 executives in the C-suite, to go out and work with a crew for 5 days.
That is impressive. And I will say that I can't think of a better position for the C-suite to do that with than the safety leader. Because if they do it with the production manager, or they do it with the general, then they're doing it. It feels big brothery. It feels like we're coming out here to make sure you're being as productive as possible. But when they go out with the person who's responsible for their safety and well-being, they're showing that they're willing to go out and tour with the person and listen to how do we keep these folks safe, which is at the end of the day what people really care about. So along those lines, I'm going to wrap up and say thank you for joining us. How can people find you personally on social media and otherwise, as well as how do they find NASSCO on social media?
Well, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You search for Dennis Pivin. You'll find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to grow my LinkedIn group, so you're certainly welcome to reach out to me there. If you have questions specific on underground infrastructure, you can also reach me at NASSCO.org. And if you go to NASSCO.org and you click on staff, you'll find me and you can link me there. Or you can send me an email at Dennis, just my first name, Dennis, at NASSCO, NASSCO.org. And I'd be happy to entertain any email feedback from your audience or questions that they might have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And just to reiterate, Pivin is spelled Pivin. And so as you're looking for Dennis and following him on all of the socials, please do. You'll find him using his name spelled that way. And on our side, this episode will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube, if you like to consume it visually. And of course, you can always visit Yellowbird at goyellowbird.com. And thank you for listening and for participating, Dennis. So I look forward to our next chat.
Thank you, Michael. Have a great day.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.